Talk about your lineage.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, psychology and certainly the various aspects of that, primarily psychoanalysis, does figure.
It's not that you were studying to be a psychologist, but you were actually or you were.
Well,
therapy.
I got put into therapy when I was really young. I mean, I was put into therapy when I was 8, and so, or 9. I was 9 years old. I grew up in a very small town in rural Wisconsin. I was intensely bullied. And there was a lot of daily violence.
And your parents were doing this to help you cope with these things?
Well, by 9 I'd had a suicide attempt. So at that time they put me into therapy, but the thing that didn't work was, instead of looking at what were the conditions that had pushed a child to make a decision like that, instead the onus or the problem became about me. Where was it my fault, or how was I defective, which I think is...
Did your parents express this to you, or is this what you came up with
Well, it was sort of just what happened through the actions of that. I was the one who was put into therapy while the abuse continued.
You were provoking these hapless
Well, and they
people
didn't, and no one ever said that I provoked it. It was sort of more of a, why can't you just ignore it? And
at 8 years old.
Sure, and I think that's something that we still live in, of people saying, why can't you just ignore it, or why would you make a stink about this? And I think it's something, and I know that this interview is about me, but we'll have more times to talk about this. But it's something that I've admired in your own work. It's 2018, and we still have many people, critics included at the New York Times, who continue to say that art should just be, it seems that their agenda is that art should just be about art. It should not have any kind of political agenda. And when it is a political agenda that is certainly outside of their birth wheelhouse, meaning that outside of their straight white privileged
I know this is
wheelhouse.
We had one encounter at the cocktails here, and immediately you zoned in on this particular writer.
Yeah.
And let me be clear. I'm with you, but I think there's something unhealthy for them when we engage them, because it makes them self-important, and they haven't earned that. They don't live as the
Totally.
So when we say,
Well, and I think it's unhealthy for us.
well, but it's unhealthy for it. Okay, I'm being facetious.
And maybe unhealthy for them in that it sort of says that they meant something to us. And for me, it actually isn't about that critic or any critic, actually, especially when we're talking about that, because in terms of talking about criticism for work that is politically minded, which I think all good work is, because the personal is political.
Well, what is there about... I'm not going to go there. I'm going to say, what is there about Martha Graham as an icon? But
that was my first dance.
That was
training.
your first. So
my first. Well, that's not true, because I had musical theater training. I mean, I first grew up. The first thing I ever had was tap. And
in
then,
Wisconsin.
And rural Wisconsin. Like, this is a town of 2,500 people.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a real. And when I say that I was really bullied, anyone would agree that I was the most targeted. But it was also because I wouldn't back away.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't change who I was. I was going to wear black. I also went through a whole phase where I wore a lot of jewelry. I remember wearing an AIDS ribbon in the 7th grade for my 7th grade school yearbook shot, and these kids asking what it meant, and me explaining what it meant, and then them saying, you're a dirty faggot who will die of AIDS, and then getting punched or spit on or any of these things.
Yes.
But I wouldn't. There was something inside of me that wouldn't. I think it was, I was born with it. I also will credit a lot of it to my sister, who I'd be dead without her. She's 18 years my senior. She actually introduced me to your work. She took me to, when I was young, I saw you, Xenon, and this is all in Minneapolis where she lived. So you toured through there.
Did you see Ron Affey?
No.
That was heavy duty for you.
I didn't, but I learned about him later.
You know what I'm saying? Because he did very...
at that theater in Minneapolis, and that was part of that was a huge thing with the NEA4 and that whole collapse, and which I learned about later when I became, I would say Martha Graham was when I first found a dance form that my body wanted to do, But then later when I saw Karen Finley and then learned about the NEA-4 and the collapse of the NEA during the AIDS crisis and what that meant, as well as all of these mentors, I mean the people...
So where did the ballet come from? You
Ballet
seem to have a
comes from
fascination with ballet.
Ballet comes from my friend Reid Bartelme.
From your friend.
Ballet comes
He is
from...
the one who doesn't speak.
He is frequently in my work and doesn't speak, though we have a podcast now that I really want you to be on. I hope
I
think
want to do
that
it.
would
You
mean, that
mentioned
would
that
mean
to me.
everything
I'd
to
love
me.
to do that.
And he took me with, he's good friends with David Hallberg, and the two of them took me to see Four Temperaments when I was like 29. I'd done some, I'd had ballet, I'd taken some ballet classes, but I'm not organized that way, and my body doesn't want to do that. My hips want to do a lot of this, but they don't want to do a lot of, they don't want to do a second, though I can hold releve really long.
Trying to understand the climate in your house, because you have a good, healthy dose of, what would I call it, Freudian revenge impulse. Is
That's
what I
my
feel.
mother.
Yeah, and I'm saying that those people were not, they didn't think you were an aberration, did they?
My parents, no. I mean, I was also my father had adopted his first two children, and he didn't know he could have children.
I see. So how many kids were in the family?
Well, they were all much older than me, so they'd all graduated high school by the time I was born. So
you were a love child.
Yeah, and I think that I certainly was given this very healthy ego by how much I was adored primarily by my mother. And with then a sort of sparring relationship with my father, who's the son of a Calvinist minister and was born in 1920. So with my father growing up through the Depression to the son of a Calvinist minister, an extreme work ethic was put on me. And
you continue to.
And I'm so glad I have that, because I certainly wouldn't have what I have in making the kind of work that I make if my wiring wasn't run on that kind of, what I'd also say pretty Midwestern, ultimately work ethic as well. My mother had this great sense of humor. So what I'd say is I got my dad's work ethic and my mother's sense of humor, and also a sense of mystery and a rearrangement of reality.
So where did Don't Fuck With Me come from? You
me.
said that was from you, not from either one of them.
No, that's me. That's something that was just, I mean, don't you feel, I'm sure that you credit a lot to your parents, and from what I've read, certainly with your mother, but don't you feel that also you were born with this drive?
Well, we can talk about that, but see, I think where queer falls in your self-assessment, mine has been about race. I was thinking that how do we talk about the fights I've had with my relatives about me trying to say gay rights and civil rights or black rights are the same. They say, no, they're not, but we can't choose. And now we know, now we say we cannot. We don't choose either. But I had
there's still so much to go there, though.
Well, I think it's still not there. I think, why can't we all be? Why does your blues have to be to trump my blues? But anyways, let's keep going through chronology. It's my questions later. Sincerity, because I feel it's very difficult now. I know Richard Move is working with it and all, but it's very difficult now to do Graham, and it does not fall in the category of ironic or camp. Do you agree with that?
I see where and I think part of it's what happened in some of the later aspects of Graham, where the faces really got, where they really got dialed up. And take, for example, Cave of the Heart. I've watched that performance live, and I've watched it at a great distance on video, where you can only see the shapes of the body.
Who was dancing it? Teresa Capicelli, maybe? Or
I don't know, but God, I love her.
Yeah,
I love her. I grew up watching Errand into the Maze so many times when I think they were doing us for Panorama Tour. So at a great distance, the shapes, when the chorus goes to mid-chorus played by one woman, genius. That's so genius, and I've seen many, 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 many playwrights and people use that since. When the chorus goes to stop Medea, and just the body shapes of this woman coming forward with revenge and going over the friend, the chorus, the society, it is, I remember crying watching that at Lincoln Center by just the shape. So I think it's this way in which, and And what I've done for the piece that'll be happening here, it's Lloyd Knight who's dancing this solo that I've made.
He is a Graham dancer.
He is.
Mm-hmm.
A Graham
He's in the
dancer.
present company now.
He's principal of the company now.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I've worked with that, with her movement systems is sincere.
The thing about Graham for me that's most convincing right now is the architecture of the stage, which you mentioned.
Right.
Now, what I think became mawkish and difficult to take feeds into my next question, which is Susan Sontag's take on camp.
Camp, sure.
Right, and camp, at least the definition I'm thinking of, is about disproportionality. Is that a term? A
disproportionate kind of feeling given to a gesture.
So the main,
or as we say in
the
theater,
mundane.
Don't ouch more than you were pinched.
Okay, but what she said was, she defines camp as where the lowly is elevated and the elevated is made low. You know? So, and I think that when Graham throws herself to the floor, made sense in 1945.
Right.
But when we think about what we know about psychological realism now,
Right.
a person, I thought you were spoofing it at the beginning of I Want You to Want
I am.
Me. You know, you're
I
crying,
am.
she's crying.
I'm in this sort of black tube,
Oh, yeah.
a la Lamentation.
And you have definitely portrayed, she declares herself a witch at the end, but you're definitely a diseased mentality.
Right.
You know, so you are in a way saying, poor dear. Right. And she's mesmerizing to look at, but she's fucking crazy.
You mean me?
Well,
my character?
I thought the character was the Martha Graham type tortured genius who wants to torture everyone around her.
Yes, and Norma Desmond.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, from Sunset Boulevard. And I mean, absolutely. I think the thing for me in terms of, but what's your question?
No, I was saying, when you say you embrace Martha Graham as a style right now, I say, is it possible to do Martha Graham without the quotations and without a sense of irony, I dare say, and camp?
Yeah, and in this solo that I have for Lloyd, the thing that I'm looking at is certainly multivalent in that it's not that it is sincere while also dealing with there's things about Martha that there are ways in which do you know Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen? She did BMC and
legendary.
And she when
I don't know her, but
that's one of my favorite
mind
things
body centering is what I know about her.
Yeah,
right?
I mean it's incredible. Roseanne is a practitioner from that, which you can see in her work. But there's a thing that Bonnie talks about that you can really feel from Martha, and that I have felt from other people who I've met and been very drawn to, which is about tapping the pipeline. So there'd be these things that Martha would say and do where you would just feel that her being would tap to this pipeline that's accessible to all of us.
Are you vulnerable? Right, because you there's a steady gale of your intellect, your charm, and your vocabulary. That, and in some ways, it's very, very difficult to get in, and we're just starting. Right. But on stage, you control that stage.
Which is what's exciting to me about this piece is
this is
the first piece that I've made where I'm actually setting up structures so that there's no way I cannot be invulnerable. I'm setting up. I started doing that in the solo of mine called Mon Mame, and there are physical ways that I have practiced and learned how to throw myself out of balance.
When I read the title is Everything is Imaginable. That's it, right?
That is
I love it. It's very beautiful. But it made me think about the famous Shark piece of Damien Hirst, which is the impossibility of death in the mind of the living. So everything is imaginable? Can you really imagine death? I don't think so. That's still that mystery beyond your language and beyond your conception. Okay, that's what the title did. Well, tell me, what does the title do? And I hear it's a structure, it's a series of solos.
Yeah.
And then you tell a very, very Jack Ferver, brilliant, entertaining monologue. But then there's a story of something that's really insidious that is allowed to penetrate it. is this right? I got this from reading about the work. But
yeah, I mean, I think and I don't. I mean, again, as I said earlier, I won't want to say too much about what happens in the piece, just so that there can be some sense of.
But the structure is a series of solos.
The structure is a series of solos, and then something happens. And while I deliver text, there's something else that there's a whole thing that happens between those solos and that part.
I see.
And to talk more about what a way in which I've spoken about my work is emotional formalism. So that I'm very emotional, and I'm also a formalist.
Yes.
And so I'm looking at what are these ways that from what I've come from, have experienced the word shatter. And that it's not over, that it is a shattering, and that...
what's being shattered, may I ask?
Myself, and that and that's what I experience, certainly gay men to be like, certainly the queer populace. I'd say that I would say that that's my experience of that is also a handshake, for sure, between the queer body and the female body. It is the ways in which the psyche, under its relentless oppression, completely falls apart and coalesces into something else, depending on who it's in front of and what it has to do.
I went online, and you say that I'm paraphrasing, as a child, you imagine that there would be a time when you would be surrounded by fierce gay people, and now you are it, and that is the new work.
And so that
is that accurate?
So that was the description I wrote before the election.
Well, before that, oh my
so
God, over a year ago.
Everything changed after the election. For me, there was no way it couldn't.
I understand.
And what I showed in my showing, my first showing that I had here, I cut pretty much all of that.
I see.
All of that's pretty much cut. And now
so
the description is about...
These men, these soloists,
and
not necessarily gay men. Or gay people.
Well, they are. Yeah, these guys who are doing it. I mean, it's James Whiteside, Lloyd Knight, Garen Scribner, and Reid Bartelme. Yeah, they're all gay.
And they're being gay was part of it.
That it's certainly that I'm dealing with the queer body. Yeah, for sure.
Also, the queer body is different than other bodies. Also.
Well, there's the fact that in that experience, you are told, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that
what was that?
About choice. You are told that you chose it, and you are told that you shouldn't exist. So you are given a statement that is, you've chosen to not exist. Is where we can take those two sentences to their final meaning.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So inside of being told that I've chosen to not exist, then I, psychologically, whether I recognize it or not, am dealing with non-existence. And what I said earlier about that then this psyche completely collapses and then coalesces into something else, that it is so mercurial and will always be looking to shape change, to find its ground, to find its place now, its position of safety, or hopefully then later power. Or that's probably where it's augured towards, because that's what egos do. So inside of that, the queer body has a kind of performativity to it. And for these men in particular, these are all men who've been either in ballet companies or they're partnering women. That's what they do. So Lloyd Knight is principal dancer with American Ballet Theater. I've watched him many, many times, and he has to pick up a lot of women. Lloyd Knight is in Graham. Unless you're playing like the Serpent in Embattled Garden, you're also dealing with women from a very masculine, straight perspective. Garen was in SF Ballet and then NDT, and then was just on Broadway after Robbie as the lead in American in Paris.
Yeah.
That's a pretty straight role. And then Reid has been in a lot of ballet companies and now dances for me, so not so straight when dancing for me. So I wanted to look at the ways in which this performativity that I've been asked to do for thousands of people, which is what they had to do for a job.
Yeah, I see you as an intellectual. I think of myself as an intellectual.
You are.
In other words,
From what I've read, certainly.
I embrace the history of ideas.
Yes.
And therefore, and that's another way that I quote, and because you have the crouch in an elegant way. I call it the crouch of, this to the world, and when does it? And the vulnerability thing is, when can it become that? I don't know, and I am like you, Republican, red stater. I have my own. I want to be loved. I want that. When does the crouch? When those of us who feel like we're set upon, we're in a minority, an oppressed minority. Can we get to the point where we're strong enough to do that? Now, that is maybe something that you can. I don't know. I haven't seen the new work.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen the new work. You said that you are now. In other words,
and I also think there's parts of that I also think are in Mon Année, which is this solo of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand what it is to hate based out of xenophobia.
Mm.
I don't understand that. So in order for me to...
You don't seem like a hater to me.
I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I am someone who feels disappointment
Mm-hmm.
and certainly rage when things are unjust. But I don't understand what it is to hate people for sexual orientation, for skin tone, for religion, for political party. What I have felt is don't hurt people.
Mm.
I'm not in, I don't want, it's simplistic. I don't want people to be hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that is a child being abused or having CHIP taken away right now. You know how
Mm-hmm.
the CHIP might be defunded, or this DACA thing, or the ways in which I don't understand people wanting to hurt people so that they can, I guess, get something more for themselves.
Or
I guess that's
they
what it's
don't,
about.
or they don't even bother to look at their actions. In other words, poison the environment because it's going to line my pocket and send my kids to college,
Right.
but it's everybody's environment. It was a hateful thing they did, or what Hannah Arendt would say, banal.
The
thing,
banality of
which is not thinking.
cruelty, yeah.
Which is what she said. That's what banality was
Yeah.
for her, just not thinking.
Yeah, I mean, well, we just had Martin Luther King Day, and I mean that his statements about it's not just the oppressor, but the people who stand silent by, who know
Mm-hmm.
even a little better. I mean, we are so
Well,
in that time.
You and I are well fed. Probably you took a vehicle here that was burning fossil fuels.
Yeah.
I live in the suburb.
Yeah.
I eat meat.
Yeah.
I wear leather clothes. I wear leather shoes.
I hope you wear leather.
I do have a pair of leather pants, but I didn't wear them today. It'd be too obvious I wore them today. But no, I think I'd say once again, when I start critiquing them, can you hold up for a moment, turn
Absolutely.
it around?
Always when there's a finger pointing forward, you've got three pointing back, girl. I mean, it's always
Say it
that
again.
way. If
Say
there's
it
a
again.
finger pointing forward, there's three pointing back.
Oh,
So
that's
but
great.
and
What are your hyphens?
and that's the thing, is it changes so much on each piece. I mean, this piece
Well, in
has
this
so
piece.
much choreography.
So
On
choreographer
this piece, I would say choreographer, writer, and then of course I've directed the
But
vision.
you're in it as well.
And I'm in it, so I'd say choreographer, writer, performer.